today, in addition to his role at the Global Commission on the Economy and Climate, Felipe Calderón is the honorary chairman of the Green Growth Action Alliance, president of the Sustainable Human Development Foundation, and a director of the World Resources Institute. By being here today with us, he's sending a strong message that what we are doing as subnationals is having an impact and is important. And that in itself is encouraging. So thank you very much, Felipe. But I know that you have many things to say on the subject, so now it's my pleasure to invite our keynote speaker to the podium. Damas y caballeros, demos la bienvenida al señor Felipe Calderón.
Thank you very much, Premier, for your generous words. Lieutenant Governor, congratulations for your very motivating speech. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, I want to start saying that I was very moved by what Al Gore said this morning. And basically the question is, why, if what is happening is so evident for anyone, what are the reasons why we are not taking action? Why the governments or business sector is not acting enough in order to tackle climate change? And probably one of the most important reasons for that, we could say, and we could use a very famous expression in the Bill Clinton campaign a long time ago. I will quote only part of that. We can say, it's the economy. And that's it. No? It's the economy, yes. And for most of the leaders of the globe, either in government or in private sector, there is a general perception that if we need to take action against climate change, that will imply huge economic cost. And no one, or very few people in government, for instance, will say, well, okay, I will pay my people economic costs in order to tackle climate change. And that is the reason. As long as we live with this apparent dilemma that we need to choose either fostering economic growth or tackling climate change, we won't solve this problem and it will hurt us so much. So under that argument, several countries, led by Norway, Sweden, the UK, South Korea, Indonesia, Colombia, and Ethiopia, asked us, a group of people coming from several sectors, to work about this bold question. Is that true? Seriously? Do we need to choose on that? And that's the reason we integrated a commission, which is chaired by our very good friend, Professor Lord Nicholas Stern, a wise man, I would say, one of the most important economists in these matters. Nick and myself are chairing this commission, and we have the support of a quite important group of economists. And among them, there are two Nobel Prize winners that have been working really hard since September 2013. And the commission is integrated also by several members. Some of them former head of states of government, like Helen Clark, for instance, from New Zealand, or President Lagos from Chile, for instance. It was Jens Stoltenberg, former Prime Minister of Norway as well, now Secretary General of NATO. But also, it is integrated by some members of former finance ministers, for instance, Trevor Manuel from South Africa, or my fellow Mexican citizen, Jose Angel Gurria, now Secretary General of OECD. Several members of the cities, the mayor of Houston, for instance, and the mayor of Rio de Janeiro as well. They are members of our group. Also, several members of private sector, quite important companies, by the way. For instance, Paul Polman, CEO of Unilever, Chad Holliday, chairman of Shell Oil Company, or John Doctorow, CEO of Bloomberg, or a lot of people coming from private sector that actually they need to look for profits in their business, but they have a real concern about climate change. So we have a quite plural commissions. We have also several members of international institutions. For instance, Sharon Burrow, which is the leader of the International Union Organization, or other members, the chairman of the Asian Development Bank. And so the commission finally is integrated by a set of quite interesting people coming from private, public sector, business sector, civil society, and so on. Well, So the question was exactly the same. Is that true? Is that the dilemma a reality? Is that a false dilemma that we need to choose? And the conclusion that we present first in our report in September, and now in this very brand new report we launched last Tuesday, we have a big answer in this page. I strongly recommend to read it, but the answer is that is false. Yes, we can. We can have economic growth, better economic growth, and at the same time, better climate. We can tackle climate change, and we can create jobs. We can reduce poverty, and at the same time, we can reduce the climate risk. But in order to do that, we have a very small window of opportunity to do so. We consider that we have not more than the next 15 years to do all the things we need to do. And in order to get this combined outcome of our effort with economic growth and lower climate risk, we need to change at least 3 big systems in the world. The first system we need to change is, of course, energy system. And it's clear we need to decarbonize the economic growth. And it doesn't mean that we need to reduce the economic growth. That is false. We are not pretending to stop economic growth. What we want is to reorient the kind of growth we deserve as human beings. So energy implies to seize the opportunity that renewable energy is providing to us. And I will talk further afterwards about it. The second system, so one is growing with less energy and with less energy intensity and with less carbon energy, if I can say that. The second system we need to change is land uses. And of course, it implies to stop deforestation, and I really applaud the effort led by Bianca Jagger. She was talking about it this morning, the Bond Challenge, she is sharing. And the point is we need to stop deforestation, but at the same time, we need to increase agricultural productivity in order to feed more people in a better way in less surface in the world. And the third system we need to change are the cities. We cannot continue with this sprawling model of cities we have following so many years. There will be impossible to follow this incredible model of horizontal development, everything concentrated on the use of individual vehicles. Now, the Commission, and it is a good part of this, the Commission says, our report says that the good news is doing this, we can reduce carbon emissions, but at the same time, we can get economic growth. And how is that possible? And that is not possible because with the recommendations we are proposing, it is possible to boost economic growth through several drivers of economic growth. One is, for instance, the increase in the productivity in natural resources or resource efficiency, for instance. Most of the economies, most of the governments in the world are very concentrated saying, well, we need to increase the productivity of capital, for instance, in order to overcome the economic crisis. We need to increase productivity of labor. We say in the report, yes, that is true, but what we need to increase is productivity in natural resources. We need to increase productivity in water, for instance. We need to increase productivity in land, and several things like that. And with that, we can increase the rates of economic growth everywhere. Second driver is investment in infrastructure. I will go deeper in this argument, but take note of this. For 1 minute, think that we do nothing in order to tackle climate change. And we continue investing in high carbon infrastructure in the next 15 years. So the Commission made a study, because we have the support and incredible institutions around the globe, from the World Resources Institute, I'm a member of the board there, from Tsinghua University in China, and the Stockholm Institute, and several of them, GGI. And finally, they became with an incredible conclusions. If we continue this path of carbon-intensive model, we need to invest $90 trillion in the next 15 years in energy, cities, and land uses. Okay, well, what happened if we change to a low-carbon economy? How much do we need to invest in infrastructure? And the conclusion is we roughly will need to invest $94 trillion. So the difference is really small, marginal, less than 5% of difference. And for some of the economies, they estimate that we can reduce even less, or we can reduce even more that difference, considering the lower operational costs in renewable energy, for instance, in these 15 years. So it is possible, and is not a bold, expensive change in infrastructure to move the economy to the right way. And finally, the third driver is innovation. And innovation has been the real engine of economic growth all the time in our history. Well, all those factors could produce better growth. For some of the members of the Commission, even bigger growth, but let's say it could be roughly the same, but with better conditions and better quality for human life. Now, let me go quickly about the gap that we are estimating, everyone is estimating. You can see that in the current path, by the year 2030, we will have almost 70 gigawatts in carbon emission, which is moving the Earth to an scenario probably over 4 Celsius degrees at the end of this century, which is impossible to live without, in my opinion. Well, we need to close the gap, and in order to keep the temperature under 2 Celsius degrees at least, we need to reduce a gap of almost 30 gigawatts of emission by the year 2030. How do we can close that gap? And I thanks to the minister that say that the report we are presenting is like a driver's manual how to close that gap by the year 2030. Yes, we propose a set of mechanisms in order to close the gap and be able to survive, if I can say, be able to close the gap related with carbon emissions. Let me go step by step. First recommendation. The first one is about cities. And I say, we cannot follow that model of cities. Not anymore. It's not viable anymore. And we are estimating that in the next 15 years, there will be more than 1 billion people around the globe coming to live in the cities, in urban developments. What does it mean? It means that we need to build, for instance, one metropolitan area like Toronto's metropolitan area every single month during the next 15 years. One Toronto every single month. So we need to design the new kind of cities. And these cities must be more concentrated in a different way. More low-carbon transport, for instance, more oriented, and public works should be oriented towards massive transportation system instead to support even more vehicles in the same streets. These cities should be better oriented in waste management, should be better oriented in, for instance, rules and isolation of buildings, and so on. And we are estimating that the cities and the people living there could have a net economic benefit of $17 trillion in energy costs by the year 2050. 17 trillion of economic benefits just switching the model of the cities. Second recommendation, it's related, well, with that we can save almost 4 gigatons. One more, land use. If we are able to stop deforestation, and we are able to increase agricultural productivity in the same or less surface, we were dealing with more than 20% of total carbon emissions in the world. And with that, we can advance a little bit more in this objective, maybe more than 6 gigatons per year of lower emissions. And that is possible. That is possible, for instance, the Tropical Alliance, which is coming from private sector. Tropical Alliance is one in which companies like Unilever, Walmart, and others, Nestle and others, are reaching a deal in this sense. We are not going to buy any single drop of palm oil by the year 2020 coming from a plantation that is not certificated. That means that any producer of palm oil will need to have a certificate that is not coming that plantation from a deforestation of the land of the rainforest. There are other examples. Niger had a program in which they had an incredible restoration of the soil, and with that, they were able to increase the income for more than 1 million families in that country. Well, you can see the numbers in the graph. Let me skip. The third one is clean energy. We need to invest at least $1 trillion a year in clean energy. And the main challenge is how to finance that, which is important, as Al Gore was saying, is that renewable energy is becoming down in terms of cost. It's becoming very competitive. But the problem with renewable energy is that it is capital intensive, so we need to finance the initial investment to that, but it's going to be offset most of the times for lower trending to zero operational costs. We can see actually, look at this graph. Al Gore was talking about that. When I took office in 2006, solar panels were like 80% higher in terms of cost than today, or the other way around. Today are 80% cheaper than they were when I took office in 2006. And the same with wind energy. And I'll talk today about a kilowatt hour at 3.8 cents, which is incredible. In several points of the world, renewable energy is as much competitive as traditional fossil fuels. And we are talking about businesses, and we are talking about governments, that we have this incredible opportunity to switch toward low carbon intensive energy around the globe. Now, big question here is, talk about the additional capacity, additional power generation capacity. Look at this. I think it's incredible and very important moment. In 2013, the additional power generation capacity was bigger than the clean energy capacity was bigger than the fossil fuel capacity installed that year. And the trend and the forecast for the future is the clean energy in terms of new or additional power generation capacity will be much bigger than traditional fossil fuels capacity. So the trend actually is already in place in favor of renewable energy everywhere. That's another part, and we can save another more than 6 gigatons by the year 2030. Talking about energy efficiency. It is possible, and it's in self-interest of companies and self-interest of consumers to save energy, which means to save money. By the way, saving energy for a lot of industries implies to increase competitiveness and productivity of the industry itself. And saving energy programs could be made either by private sector in its self-interest or by governments. And let me give you an example that we made in Mexico. We had an ambition program in order to renovate and to exchange appliances, mainly refrigerators and air conditioning equipment, especially for poorest families in the country. And actually the program was honestly very well designed in the sense that it was a technical removal of the old refrigerator in a home. One company was going to do that, but the name of the program was really, really boring. It's something like substituting refrigerators for low carbon emissions appliances in the long term, so very boring. So I talked with the Secretary of Energy at that time, and we decided to change the name of the program. And the program is related with this fact. We in Mexico, our wives, told us, their husbands call us like mi viejo, or my old one, or my old man. No? So the name of the program was Change Your Old One for a New One. No? So, cambia tu viejo por uno nuevo. No? It was a great success. We changed almost 2 million refrigerators in 3 years. No? Of course, some women were a little bit disappointed when they arrived to the store to see what exactly the program was about. Anyway, but it's possible to make massive investment in that. And at the same time, we changed 45 million lamps for saving energy lamps in the poorest homes in Mexico. It was the largest program of substitution of lamps in the world so far. So other measure we are proposing, what that you can see the numbers related with saving energy. Carbon pricing. Carbon pricing is a reality. It's happening already. It's happening here. It's happening in British Columbia. It's happening in a lot of places with different mechanisms. Some of it is carbon tax, other is cap and trade. But honestly, we believe if we need to choose one single measure in order to improve the switch to our low carbon economy, that measure should be pricing carbon. Why? Because the most important point is to apply the right economic incentives for investors and consumers and producers to switch towards low carbon economy. If the economy provides the right signals, the economy and the markets will work. That's by true. So this is happening with incredible results. Today, already 38 countries have put in place carbon pricing, and 2 coming soon, for instance, which is South Africa and Chile, are going to establish a mechanism. A lot of provinces, over 20 states or provinces, including Ontario, of course, and Quebec and British Columbia, established already these kind of programs. In Canada, regardless that there is not carbon pricing at federal or national level, the local regulation implies to cover 80% of the emission of the country. So it's working, and it's working in a very well manner. Other measure, well, carbon pricing could reduce more than 4. We can help to get reduction in carbon emissions. Look at this graph of infrastructure. I was talking about at the beginning, but if you consider this line, the red or orange line or orange bar, following with business as usual, we need to invest like $90 trillion in the traditional infrastructure. You can add and rest some marginal difference, and at the end, if we switch to the new climate economy with low carbon infrastructure, we will invest almost the same. So the argument is this: if we are to invest one way or another $90 trillion in infrastructure, either in energy, cities, or land uses, let's do the right way from now. There is no reason to invest, for instance, in a coal facility that will lock in us by 50 years polluting. And that's the reason that countries like India, China, Indonesia, Turkey, a lot of countries must to take very soon. Other point is related with innovation, like fostering innovation through the measures we are recommending. Look at this. This is the performance of the patents, registered patents around the world before Kyoto Protocol was implemented. And suddenly you can see the Kyoto Protocol, and this new regulation trigger the innovation in patents related with low carbon economy or renewable energy. And you can see the trend and the rest of technologies. But in particular this, if we establish clear regulations and clear economic incentives, we will trigger innovation, and innovation will boost, again, economic growth. That's what we are looking for. Talking about businesses, a lot of companies are already addressing this issue, and it's not because they are very generous and they are thinking in their neighbors or whatever. They are looking for profits and margins. 53 out of 100 companies in the Fortune magazine, 53 are saving money, saving energy, and all of them have saved above $1 billion with this kind of measures recently. And finally, well, we can add on that, and actually we can move to other industry. For instance, only using this small device in the planes, I don't even remember what is the name of that, but it's something winglets, exactly. Only with this, the plane is able to recover, to pay back the cost of that in 3 years. And it would save an incredible amount of fuels moving, or others, talking about shippings. The most modern ships, for instance, are using only 20% of the fuel used by the less efficient ships in the world. So any industry could improve its economic revenues and improve the carbon emission or reduce carbon emission. And finally, the last recommendation is removing hydrofluorocarbons, which is, by the way, one of the, among others, incredible achievements we got coming from Canada some years ago in Montreal Protocol. HFCs. If we remove that, we will advance a lot in our goal to carbon emission reductions. Just talking about big company, maybe you have heard about it, the name Coca-Cola. Unfortunately, they pay nothing to say this, but it could be a good example, no? Coca-Cola put like 1 million refrigerators. They replace with free HFCs refrigerators, and they are saving 40% in efficiency only in those equipments they replace. And something like that. Well, at the end, we can, of course, you will see a lot of overlap in these measures. The Commission canceled this overlap, and at the end, the conclusion is, following these bold, big measures, is more complicated than this, but following this, we can reach almost all the carbon emission reductions we need to do by the year 2030. And the conclusion is exactly the way I started this message. It is possible to have economic growth, and this evidence is not coming only from the economic papers and research made by the very brilliant people we have in the commissions. It's coming from the clear evidence we are observing every day. Look at this. Sweden. Sweden increased, since Sweden started to have this kind of measures, Sweden increased like more than 50% its economic growth and reduced almost 25% its carbon emission related to year 1990. And you can see these states in the US, the regions that working together, they have had more economic growth than the average in the United States, and they have reduced more than the average, almost 18%, their carbon emissions in the US. And the same in Canada. California, of course, is another big example. The GDP of California grew 24%, and the emissions were reduced 20%. Denmark, Ontario, well, Ontario increased 50% its GDP and reduced its emission as well. Or British Columbia. British Columbia grew above the average in Canada and reduced its carbon emissions since British Columbia implemented the carbon tax. And the same evidence in Europe. But the most important one is what happened last year, 2014. By first time ever in 40 years at global level, the GDP of the world increased almost 3%, and the emissions didn't grow. In other words, we started to decarbonize the economic growth, which is the most important conclusion. So it is false that we cannot economic grow without decarbonizing the economy. In conclusion, my friends, we not only believe, we say that we have the argument and we are able to demonstrate with scientific evidence that it is possible to have economic growth and tackle climate change. That all those arguments coming from the other side saying that we are trying to damage people, sacrificing their economic benefits, is completely false. That we can design the kind of development that a human being needs for the future because this is the right way to do. And is not an option, is not an alternative, is the only way in which we can provide real development for human beings in the coming years. Is the only way in which we can avoid a big disaster, a catastrophe at the end of the century, and at the same time providing opportunities to the people like everyone else and any one of us want for our people. So this is the way to do, and I strongly recommend to read the report. You have there the webpage, and you have some reference, and please feel free to write us and support to provide the right arguments for governments and businesses to win this battle that is we are going to win. Thank you very much.